They came to your door without knocking, not literally, not with suits and briefcases and sealed letters pressed with wax. No, they came the way truth always comes, quietly at first, like a whisper you almost mistake for the wind, like a feeling you've been carrying your whole life but never had a name for, like the strange sense that you were always meant for something you couldn't quite see yet, something older than your name, older than your city, older than anything your parents ever told you about who you were supposed to become. And you felt it, didn't you? You felt it as a child, standing in a crowd and somehow feeling alone in the best way. Not lonely, alone, set apart, like you were watching everything from a slight distance, like the world was a film you were observing rather than living inside of. Like you already knew something the people around you hadn't figured out yet, but you couldn't explain what it was. You just knew. And you buried that knowing. Because the world told you to. They told you to fit in. They told you to quiet down. They told you that the feeling in your chest, that low, ancient hum, that sense of something vast waiting just beneath the surface of your ordinary life, was arrogance, was ego, was a child's fantasy that needed to be outgrown like a pair of shoes you'd worn too long. So you outgrew it. Or you tried. You built a life that made sense on paper. You followed the rules that everyone agreed on. You smiled when it was expected and stayed quiet when silence was safer, and you told yourself that the hum in your chest was just nostalgia for something you'd imagined, that you were nobody special, that this was enough. And then they found you, not with letters, not with messengers, not in any way you could have anticipated or prepared for. They found you the way destiny always finds the people it has been waiting for. Through the cracks, through the exact moments when your life broke open and your carefully constructed ordinary existence fell apart just enough for the light to get in. They found you in the silence after the failure. They found you in the room where nobody came to check on you. They found you in the version of yourself that everyone else had already written off. The one standing in the rubble of something that was supposed to work, something that was supposed to be enough, something that was supposed to be the proof that you were fine, that you were normal, that you had successfully convinced yourself and everyone around you that the hum was just noise. And they said, "You are not who you think you are." Wow. Let that sit for a moment. You are not who you think you are. They didn't say it cruelly. They didn't say it to diminish you. They said it the way a master sculptor looks at a piece of stone that has been sitting in a field for 100 years, covered in moss and mud and the weight of seasons, and says, "There is something extraordinary inside this. There always was. And the world just hasn't known where to look." You were the heir to something you had never been told about. And the question, the one that cuts right through everything, through every defense you've built and every story you've told yourself, is this: what do you do when you discover that the life you've been living was never the whole story? What do you do when you find out that the ordinary version of yourself was always a placeholder for the real one? Let's talk about the wound first. Because you cannot inherit anything real without understanding what was taken from you. Something was taken. Don't pretend it wasn't. Don't do that thing you do where you minimize it, where you fold it small and pack it away and tell yourself it wasn't that bad, that other people have had it worse, that you should be grateful, that complaining is weakness. Don't do that right now. Just for these few minutes, in the space between you and this voice, let the truth stand up straight. Something was taken from you before you were old enough to know what you had. Maybe it was the version of yourself that was curious and boundless and unafraid. Maybe it was the belief that you mattered. Not because of what you produced or performed or achieved, but simply because you existed, because you were here, because there is no other configuration of cells and soul and memory in the entire history of this universe that has ever been you, and there never will be again. Maybe it was your name. Not the one on your documents, your real name. The one that describes what you actually are, underneath all the adjustments you made to survive other people's comfort. Time passes while you live as someone else's idea of who you should be, and you don't even notice because it happens slowly. It happens in the everyday moments. It happens every time you swallowed a sentence that deserved to be spoken. Every time you made yourself smaller so someone else could feel larger. Every time you looked in a mirror and assessed yourself through the eyes of people who never took the time to look closely. The wound is not dramatic. That's the cruelest part. The wound doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a single devastating moment you can point to and say, there, that's where it happened. That's where I lost myself. It comes in decades of small surrenders, in years of choosing safety over truth, in 1,000 tiny moments of self-betrayal that were so quiet, so reasonable, so logical at the time that you didn't even realize you were betraying yourself. And then one day, and this is the moment the society has been waiting for, one day you wake up and the life around you looks fine. It looks acceptable. It looks like what you were told to want, and something deep inside you, something that has been patient for a very long time, stops waiting quietly. It starts screaming, not loudly, not in a way other people can hear, but you hear it in the 3 a.m. darkness, in the middle of conversations that bore you to your bones, in the nauseating feeling of watching someone else live the version of your life that you gave up without realizing you were giving it up. That scream that is the society calling you home. Now here is what you need to understand about this society, about what it actually is. It is not a building. It is not a group of robed figures sitting in candlelit rooms making decisions about your fate. Nah, it is nothing so theatrical as that. It is older than theater. It is older than ritual. It is as old as the first human being who looked up at the night sky and understood, truly understood, that they were not an accident. That the precision of the stars, the geometry of a leaf, the impossible engineering of a heartbeat, none of this is random. None of this happened by chance. The society is the lineage of people who refuse to accept the smallness that the world tried to assign them. It is every person throughout history who was told they were nothing and chose, in the private, unglamorous, unseen interior of their own soul, to be something else. It is every human being who stood in the ruins of a life that had collapsed and decided, without applause, without witnesses, without a single person there to validate the decision, to rebuild, to come back, to rise not in spite of the breaking, but because of it. You were always supposed to be part of this lineage. That is the inheritance. And the reason you never knew about it is the same reason heirs are sometimes kept from their inheritance for years. Because the world around them is not ready for what they would become if they knew what they were owed. Think about that. There are people who benefit from you not knowing who you are. There are systems that function perfectly well as long as you continue to believe that you are ordinary, that your ceiling is where they tell you it is, that the size of your life is determined by the size of your beginnings. As long as you believe that you are manageable, you are predictable, you are safe for the world that needed you to stay small. But the society doesn't need you small. The society has been waiting for you to grow into your full height, and it has been patient, and it has been watching. And it has sent messengers you didn't recognize as messengers. Every book that cracked you open, every failure that stripped away a false identity, every person who underestimated you and handed you the gift of low expectations to exceed. Every single thing that broke you was an initiation. That's the part they don't tell you at the beginning. The initiation is not comfortable. Initiations are never comfortable. Every society, every lineage, every tradition of excellence in the history of this world has understood one fundamental truth, that transformation requires heat, that you cannot become the refined version of yourself without first being placed under pressure, that the diamond is not special despite the millions of years of compression it endured. The diamond is a diamond because of the compression. You endured compression. Maybe people saw it. Maybe they watched you struggle and they made their assessments and they decided what you were and where you were going, and they filed you away in the category of people who tried and failed to be exceptional. And you heard those assessments. You absorbed them. You carried them around for years like stones in your pockets, weighing you down, convincing you that what they saw was what was true. But there is a difference between the surface of a thing and its nature. Ha ha ha, and isn't that something? The world has always been better at reading surfaces than nature's. The world is fast. The world wants quick information. The world looks at your circumstances and your track record and your visible results, and it makes a determination, and it is usually wrong because nature takes time. Because what a thing truly is revealed slowly. The seed doesn't look like the tree. The caterpillar doesn't look like anything that could possibly fly. The person in the darkest chapter of their story doesn't look like the person who will one day be spoken about in rooms they haven't entered yet. You didn't look like your destiny. How could you? You were mid-transformation, and the members of the society, the ones who belong to it, the ones who have claimed their inheritance and are living inside it, they know how to see past the surface. They know that the most powerful people in any room are not always the loudest ones. They know that the quietest rebuilding often leads to the most permanent rising. They know that suffering, when it is survived with dignity and purpose, becomes the most unshakable kind of foundation. They've been watching you survive, and they've decided you're ready. But here is the thing about inheriting something this significant. Here is the thing they don't put in the dramatic reveal, the thing nobody writes about in the stories of chosen heirs and secret destinies and people who discover they were always meant for more. You have to decide to accept it. The inheritance is not handed to you. It is not deposited into your account while you sleep. It is not granted by someone else's authority or belief in you or decision about your worth. The society cannot claim you if you will not claim yourself. The lineage cannot receive you if you refuse to acknowledge what you come from. And this right here is where most people turn away. Not because they don't want it. They want it desperately. They want it with the hunger of someone who has spent years believing they were ordinary and suddenly, achingly suspects they might not be. But wanting it isn't enough. Accepting it requires something far more demanding than desire. It requires you to believe it when no one else does yet. It requires you to walk forward into a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet, trusting that the act of walking forward is what creates it. It requires you to stop waiting for validation, for evidence, for someone else's announcement that you have been selected, that you belong, that you are allowed. Because no announcement is coming. The society does not issue certificates. The universe does not send confirmations. You simply decide. And then you live as though the decision is permanent. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And the difference between the people who claim their inheritance and the people who walk up to the edge of it and then retreat, the difference is not talent, it is not intelligence. It is not privilege or luck or any of the things that people typically use to explain why some people rise and others don't. The difference is the willingness to be wrong about yourself in the direction of more. Most people are willing to be wrong about themselves in the direction of less. They will accept that they are smaller than they suspected, less capable than they hoped, less deserving than they secretly believed. They will accommodate their own diminishment. They will make peace with the ceiling. But the heirs, the ones who actually show up for what was waiting for them, these are the people who are willing to be wrong in the other direction, who say, what if I am more than I've been told? What if the life I've been living is not the evidence of my limits, but the evidence of my unlived potential? What if everything that happened to me was not the story of how I was defeated, but the first chapter of something that has not yet been written? What if that hum was always real? Let's talk about what the rebuilding actually looks like. Because it does not look like movies. It does not look like a montage set to swelling music where you emerge in 60 seconds transformed and radiant and ready. It does not look like the triumphant version that people post about after the fact, when the hard parts are safely in the past and can be narrated with the comfortable distance of success. It looks like silence. It looks like the discipline of working on yourself in rooms that nobody else enters. It looks like sitting with the discomfort of becoming someone new when the old version of you is still what everyone around you recognizes and responds to. It looks like being in the strange, disorienting middle space between who you were and who you are becoming, where you no longer fit in the old life but haven't fully stepped into the new one. It looks like mornings where you don't feel like it and you do it anyway. That's the secret the society keeps. Not some esoteric knowledge, not some hidden code or ancient text or locked room with answers inside. The secret is this: the most important work of your life will never feel significant in the moment you are doing it. It will feel like another morning, another discipline, another choice to show up for yourself when it would be easier and more comfortable and more socially acceptable to not. The transformation doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. And this is what the world misses every single time when it looks at someone extraordinary and wonders how they got there. It looks for the moment, the turning point, the singular dramatic event that changed everything. Because the world wants a story it can point to. Because the world is impatient and it needs the explanation to be simple, but there is no moment. There is only the accumulation of choices that compound over time, silently, invisibly, unremarkably, until one day the sum is so large that it becomes undeniable. Until one day the person who was invisible becomes impossible to overlook. Until one day the person who was written off stands somewhere new, and everyone who wrote them off is trying to remember when they decided that was the right call. You will be that person. If you do the invisible work, you will be the one they cannot explain, the one who shouldn't have made it but did. The one who had every reason to stay down and somehow got back up in a way that doesn't fit the narrative they constructed about you. And you won't need to correct the narrative. The narrative will correct itself. There is something I need you to understand about identity, about who you actually are beneath all the versions of yourself you've performed for others. You have worn many faces. You know this. You have been the person who laughs at the right times and agrees at the right times and makes themselves useful and likable and easy to be around. You have been the version of yourself that was optimized for other people's comfort, and you got good at it. So good that sometimes you forgot you were performing. So good that the performance and the performer began to merge, and you stopped being entirely sure where the role ended and you began. Nah. That is the deepest work of the inheritance, to find the edge of the performance and step behind it, to ask quietly, honestly, without judgment, who am I when there is no audience? Who am I when nothing is at stake socially, when nobody is watching, when the approval or disapproval of others is completely irrelevant? Who am I in the room by myself at midnight when the day is done and all the performances are finished and there is just me? Because that person, that unperformed, unoptimized, raw and unedited interior self, that is the heir. That is the one the society is calling for, not the version that was shaped by other people's expectations, not the version that learned to survive by being acceptable, the original one, the one that was there before the world started editing you. And here is what is remarkable about that person. That person is never forgotten. Even through all the years of performance, all the years of self-minimization, all the years of burying the hum under the reasonable, practical, socially acceptable noise of everyday life, that person kept the flame, kept it small, kept it protected, kept it hidden from the winds that would have extinguished it if they'd known it was there. You kept it alive through everything. Wow, that is not a small thing. That is one of the most profound acts of loyalty a person can perform, to remain loyal to the truest version of yourself, even when the world is making you a better offer to abandon it. Even when abandoning it would be easier, more comfortable, more rewarded by the people around you. You refuse to let it go entirely. And that is why the society found you. Not because you were perfect, not because you had done everything right, or risen without falling, or maintained your identity without ever compromising, but because through everything, through the failures and the compromises and the performances and the ordinary years, you kept the thing alive that makes you worth finding. Now let me talk about what happens after you accept the inheritance. After you say yes, after you step quietly and without fanfare into the version of yourself that was always waiting, people will not immediately understand. This is the part that tests people, the part that makes heirs doubt whether they made the right choice. Because when you begin to live differently, when you begin to take up the space you were actually meant to occupy, when you begin to pursue the things you actually want, rather than the things you were supposed to want, when you begin to hold yourself to the standard of your real potential, rather than the standard of other people's comfort, people will be confused. They will be confused because the role they assigned you no longer fits. Because the narrative they constructed about you is suddenly at odds with the evidence in front of them. Because human beings are creatures of pattern, and you were a pattern they thought they understood, and now the pattern has changed, and changed patterns are unsettling to the people who were relying on them. Some will celebrate it. A few, the ones who loved you for who you actually were, even when you were hiding it. They will see it and they will feel the recognition of something they always suspected, and they will be glad. But some will resist it. Some will need you to go back to the version of yourself they knew. Some will interpret your becoming as a criticism of their standing still. Some will be threatened by your expansion in a way they cannot articulate but can absolutely express through withdrawal, through subtle undermining, through the quiet, persistent suggestion that you are being arrogant, that you are forgetting where you came from, that you are changing in ways that are unseemly or too much or not quite right. You will feel the pull to accommodate them. You always have. The performance was built for exactly this, for moments when other people needed you to be smaller so they could feel comfortable. And the pull will be familiar and seductive and dressed in the language of humility and groundedness and loyalty. Don't mistake smallness for humility. Humility is knowing what you are and being honest about it, without inflation and without deflation. Humility is accuracy. It is not the same as limitation. It is not the same as apologizing for your size. The heir who has accepted their inheritance and who walks with the confidence of someone who knows their lineage is not arrogant. They are honest. And honest is harder than arrogant. Honest requires you to see yourself clearly, without the comfort of exaggeration in either direction. You are not more than you are. You are not less. You are exactly what the society has been waiting for. And it is time to start living like it. Now let me tell you something about the people who belong to this society. The ones who have claimed what they were always owed. They are not the loudest people in the room. Often they are the quietest. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have become very selective about where they put their energy. Because they have learned, sometimes the hard way, often through the specific humiliation of misplacing their trust and their words and their openness, that not every room deserves their full presence. They know how to be patient, not passive, not resigned, patient. There is an enormous difference, and the world conflates them constantly, and you need to know the difference because it will determine the quality of everything you build from here. Passive is waiting because you don't believe anything will come. It is the waiting of someone who has given up motion because they have given up hope. It is stillness born from defeat, from the exhaustion of trying and failing enough times that trying no longer seems worth it. Patient is waiting because you understand that timing is real. It is the waiting of someone who is actively preparing, who is doing the invisible work, who is building the foundation that will hold the weight of what is coming. It is stillness born from wisdom, from the understanding that not every door opens on your schedule, but that the right door opens when you are actually ready to walk through it. The people of this society are patient. They do not chase, they prepare and they attract. They do not beg, they build and they receive. They do not shout about what they deserve. They live it quietly, consistently, with the kind of sustained discipline that is invisible to people who are watching for fireworks, but completely obvious to anyone who is paying the right kind of attention. And here is what you learn when you have been living this long enough. The right people always pay the right kind of attention. Eventually. The connection, the opportunity, the recognition you were told you needed to chase, it arrives. Not always on the timeline you wanted, not always in the form you imagined, but it arrives because life has an extraordinary talent for completing circuits, for connecting what belongs together, for finding the match for a flame that has been burning honestly for long enough. Keep burning honestly. I want to talk to the version of you that is afraid, not dismissively, not to tell you that fear is wrong or weak or something to be conquered and discarded, but honestly, because the heir who pretends they feel no fear is either lying or has not yet understood how much is at stake. Fear is the appropriate response to discovering that your life is larger than you were told. Fear is what you feel when the ceiling lifts and you see how high the sky actually goes and your legs respond before your mind does. You are afraid because this is real. You are afraid because there is something genuine on the other side of this. Not a fantasy, not a story, not a performance, but an actual life that is actually yours, built on the actual truth of who you are. And real things are scary in a way that imagined things never are. Imagined things are manageable because they are controlled. Real things are not controlled. Real things are alive. Real things can be lost. And the fear of losing what you haven't yet built is its own particular kind of torment. But here is what fear actually is, when you look at it directly instead of sideways. Fear is information. Fear is your interior map telling you that something matters, that the stakes are real, that this is not a rehearsal. And information, used correctly, is not a reason to stop. It is a reason to prepare. It is a reason to be careful and intentional and honest with yourself about what you are actually building and why. The heirs of this lineage were not fearless. They were disciplined enough to act in the presence of fear, without letting the fear become the decision maker. They learned, and you will learn, that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the specific act of deciding that what you are building matters more than the fear of failing to build it. You will be afraid. Do it anyway. And here is the thing about action in the presence of fear. The fear doesn't disappear, not at first, but it changes quality. It becomes less like a wall and more like wind, and you learn that wind can be used. Sailors don't wait for calm water. Sailors learn to read the wind and use it, to let it fill the sail, to let it move the vessel in the direction of the destination, even when it is not cooperating, even when it is blowing sideways, even when every logical assessment of the conditions would suggest that staying in the harbor is the safer choice. The harbor is not your home anymore. You were claimed by something that requires open water. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes with this territory. I want to name it because it is real, and because nobody names it, and because the silence around it makes people think they are the only one experiencing it, when in fact it is the universal companion of everyone who is growing faster than their environment. You will outgrow rooms, not arrogantly, not with contempt or superiority, but simply naturally, the way a plant outgrows a pot, not because the pot was wrong, but because the plant did what plants do, and now it needs more space to continue doing it. You will be in conversations that no longer satisfy you. You will spend time with people whose questions have become too small for where your mind is going. You will look at the ambitions that used to excite you and feel a strange, quiet sadness that they no longer do, because what you want now is so much larger and more complex and harder to explain that most people in your life will not immediately understand what you are reaching for. And the loneliness of that is real. Don't minimize it. The loneliness of becoming is one of the most specific and unglamorous experiences of genuine growth, and it is not talked about enough, because people only ever talk about becoming after it is done, when the story has a good ending, and the loneliness has been replaced by the belonging that comes from finding the people who match the new version of you. But in the middle, in the specific, uncomfortable middle of being in between, the loneliness is real. And the answer is not to stop growing. The answer is not to shrink back down into the rooms you've outgrown so that the loneliness goes away. Because that loneliness, though it aches, is the ache of your true life making space for itself. It is the ache of a life expanding. And the ache of expanding is always preferable to the slow, quiet suffocation of staying too small for too long. The society is full of people who chose the expanding ache. They will find you when you are ready, or you will find them, or life will arrange the finding in a way that you will look back on later and call inevitable. Here is the truth about the secret society. Here is what they actually want from you, now that they've found you, now that the claim has been made. Not your perfection, not your performance, not your polished public presentation of someone who has everything together, not the version of you that has figured it all out and has the evidence to prove it and can present it cleanly and confidently without any of the mess showing through. They want your truth. They want the heir who shows up having been through the fire and who carries the fire forward without pretending the burning didn't hurt. They want the person who has been broken in the specific ways that teach you what cannot be broken. They want someone who has looked at the worst of themselves and chosen, in full awareness of what they were choosing, to become better anyway. Because that is the only inheritance worth claiming, not the one handed to you by circumstances or luck or the privilege of an easy life. The inheritance that is earned through surviving the unsurvivable, through becoming who you are in spite of every force that tried to prevent it, through choosing 10,000 times in 10,000 unremarkable moments to be the person you actually are rather than the person the world found convenient. That inheritance is yours. Nobody can take it. Nobody gave it to you, which means nobody can revoke it. It doesn't depend on the economy or the opinion of the room or the current narrative about who succeeds and who doesn't. It is structural. It is built into the foundation of who you have become. Wow. And it is permanent. This is the part where some people look for the catch. Where is the hidden clause, the fine print, the condition that makes the inheritance contingent on something you might lose or fail to maintain? The world has trained you to look for the catch. The world has conditioned you to believe that anything that feels this true must have a limitation, an expiration, a moment when the good thing reveals its secret terms. There are no secret terms. You are the heir. You always were. The only condition is that you act like it. And I want to be precise about what that means. Acting like the heir. Living into the inheritance. Because it is too easy in moments of emotional intensity to hear something like this and to feel it deeply and to carry it for a few days and then to return gradually to the old life, to the old patterns, to the old smallness, because the old smallness is comfortable and comfort is seductive, and the world is very good at offering it in forms that look like wisdom. Settling is not wisdom. Resting is not the same as settling. Rest is intentional, temporary, strategic. It is the pause that makes the next movement possible. It is the space in the music that makes the notes around it matter. Rest is part of the work. Settling is the decision to make the pause permanent. It is looking at the rest and deciding to call it the destination. It is mistaking the recovery room for the life. You know the difference. You always have. And the society is not asking you to run without stopping. It is asking you to know with absolute clarity when you are stopping to rest and when you are stopping because stopping has become the habit. When you are taking care of yourself and when you are taking refuge in the comfortable story that you've done enough, that this is as far as you go, that the person you have become is the final version. There is no final version. This is not a criticism. This is the most liberating sentence you will ever absorb. You are not finished. You will not be finished. Every version of yourself that you inhabit will eventually reveal that there is more. Not because you are lacking, but because you are alive. And being alive means being in motion. And being in motion means there is always a further point on the horizon that becomes visible only because you kept walking toward the last one. Ha 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 ha. The horizon keeps moving. That is not a cruelty. That is the design. I want to end with something that has nothing to do with strategy or discipline or the specific mechanics of becoming. I want to end with something simpler than all of that. I want to end with what it means to have been found, because the deepest truth of this entire inheritance, the thing underneath all the language about lineage and belonging and secret societies and heirs and claiming your destiny, the deepest truth is simply this: you were never actually alone, not in the way it felt. Not in the specific loneliness of those years when you carried the hum and couldn't explain it and felt like the only person in the world who was living with something that didn't quite fit the life they were in. Not in the silence after the failures. Not in the rooms where nobody came. You were never alone in those places. You were in the company of every person who came before you and survived their equivalent of those moments. You were part of a lineage so long and so continuous that it reaches back to the beginning of human striving, to the first person who looked at what they were given and decided to reach for what they deserved, to the first heir who said, "No, not this, something else, something truer, something that actually fits the shape of what I am." You are their continuation. Everything they survived made it possible for you to survive. Everything they built, even the things that didn't last, even the things that collapsed or burned or were taken, all of it contributed to the conditions that produced you and the version of you that is standing here right now, hearing this, feeling the truth of it in some place that doesn't have a name but is undeniably real. That version of you is the proof that the lineage has not broken. The lineage has not broken. Say that quietly to yourself. Mean it. Through everything. Through all the generations of people who struggled in ways you'll never fully know, who survived losses that should have ended everything, who rebuilt from nothing quietly, without witnesses, without guarantee of outcome. Through all of that, something was preserved. Something was passed forward. Something arrived here, intact in you. And the society that found you, the lineage that claimed you, is not asking you to be grateful in a passive way, is not asking you to simply receive what was preserved and stand quietly with it. It is asking you to add to it. It is asking you to live in a way that preserves something for the next person, for the next heir who is somewhere right now, carrying the hum, confused by it, burying it under ordinary life, waiting to be found. The next person who needs proof that the inheritance is real, that the lineage continues, that the feeling they've been carrying is not arrogance or delusion, but the early signal of something genuine and large and worth living for. You become the proof for them, not by being perfect, not by performing your inheritance, but by living it honestly, by showing what it actually looks like to grow into your real size, by letting the people who are watching, the young ones, the ones just beginning, the ones at the edge of their own turning, by letting them see that it is possible, that the extraordinary is not reserved for someone else, that the hum they feel is real, that they are not alone, that they were always meant to be found. And so this is where I leave you. Not with instructions, not with a list of things to do tomorrow morning to begin the inheritance, not with a program or a plan or a structured approach to becoming the heir. I leave you with what the society actually delivers, the thing that was always being preserved and passed forward through every generation of people who refused smallness. I leave you with yourself, the real one, the unedited, unperformed, unhidden one that has been waiting patiently, so patiently, for the moment when you would finally stop running from it and turn around and look at it directly and say, yes, yes, I see you. Yes, I know what you are. Yes, I am done pretending you are less than you are. The hum was always real. The knowing was always accurate. The inheritance was always yours. And now that you've been found, now that the claim has been made, there is only one thing left to do. Live like you know it, not loudly, not performatively, not for the validation of anyone who doubted you or dismissed you or filed you in the wrong category, not to prove anything to the rooms that decided your ceiling before you discovered your floor. Live like you know it for you, quietly, completely, with the specific, unshakable calm of someone who has stopped needing the world to confirm what they have already confirmed for themselves. The society did not find a candidate. They did not find a possibility. They did not find a person who might, under the right circumstances, with enough support and favorable conditions and the approval of the right people, become something worth noticing. They found the heir. They found you, and you were never lost. You were only waiting to be ready to be found. The verdict is in. It has always been in. and it reads the same way it always has, in every language, in every century, in every case of a person who stopped believing the world's small assessment of them and claimed the inheritance that was written for them before they knew they had a name. You are exactly who you were always going to become.